Thank you. I would like to start with saying that I'm really grateful for the organizers of the conference who made this event to happen. I'm also grateful for the invitation and the possibility that I can speak here. Although, at the time when I was preparing for this presentation, I felt that it's a bit too early for me to be here, because it was just this spring when we launched a new small project specifically to date some of the very early Christian burials and Christian symbolical contexts. So some of the points that I'm going to make today may be reinterpreted by the end of the year. So, but to start with, some very basic time frame of historical events. The very first crusade that we know happened to Estonia already in the 11th century, but this is such a the data about this crusade is so obscure that we may even call it as a legendary crusade. There is not much known about this. The next one in 1197 that was mostly organized probably by the Danish king. We know a little bit more, but even this one is so obscure. All what we know is that the Danish king was planning a missionary campaign to Kurland, to Western Latvia. But there was a storm on the Baltic Sea and they were blown to the northwards, and eventually they ended up in Virumaa, which is in northeast Estonia. So they possibly landed, plundered, hopefully also baptized some, and left. So none of these early crusades had any permanent effect to the locals. Although at the same time, in the late 12th century, the order of the Livonian Brothers of the Swords settled in what is now in the central Latvia. And since 1208,
after
missions to modern Estonia. This picture also
we have coming next Wolińskie, but unsuccessfully for the first time, next Szczecin, and again
Catholic priests are cutting down one of the Estonian idols. What is important about this crusade is that we have one of the best sources about the Christianization process from this time, because the priest of the order was written down the Chronicle of Henry of Livonia, and as he was also the priest who possibly took part of all of this event. He was also going through all of these battles. We have differently of many other chronicles, medieval chronicles, which just list the events. This chronicle provides also rather vital descriptions of the battles and so on. This gives rather more intimate and also more emotional view. However, it still is just one-sided view, although very, very valuable. So in 1227, the last Estonian stronghold was conquered, and by this, the crusade was finished, and Estonia entered to the Middle-Age world. Depending now on the scholar's preference, some start the Christianized and baptized Estonia in the 1220s, some in 1230s, some in 1250s. There are different arguments here and there, but this is where we more or less start the history of the Christian Estonia. So, this much about the historical events. My intention is rather, what did it really mean? What did it mean to be a Christian in this pre- or early converted country? How do we recognize the Christians in the archaeological material? How do we distinguish the Christians and the pagans? Did Christians and pagans exist in the real life? Of course they did exist. But what I mean here is when we follow the interpretations about these people, we often tend to ascribe a sort of canonical or even dogmatic ideas what a pagan or a Christian should look like and behave. So that's why I ask this question also, did such canonical and dogmatic views really exist? And also what effect had the different Christian confessions and rulers to the whole Christianization process? And what is the main question for me, my background is in archaeology, is also how to explain this conflict between the historical sources, the Chronicle of Henry of Livonia in particular, and the archaeology, which gives us somehow a very different view. And this is something I'm gonna throw now in the next minutes. But before I go further to the Estonian material, I just wanted to share one of the picture from the 17th century missionary from Sweden, Samuel Rehn, who had been baptizing and made missionary trips to Lapland. On the background, he has been drawing Sami shaman, or a witch, or a noida, or however we call him. But what is most interesting is this drum. And if we make a close-up of the drum, we see there are a lot of different figures. The animals, the sun, and so on. Those which probably depict the helping spirits or something like that. We also see the god Thor here, which is rather natural considering how long relations are between the Vikings and the Samis. But we also find the Swedish prince and his followers. And most importantly, in this context, we find Jesus Christ and the apostles, all depicted on the same drum. Why I wanted to share this picture is mostly that if we are going to interpret the material records, the material culture, it is often that we have just the fragments, and we put the fragments into the larger picture. So how do we interpret this Sami shaman? He's probably not Christian, although Jesus Christ and the Christianity has some sort of position also in his worldview. And this is something that I'm gonna also bear in mind when going through the next examples. The Estonian Iron Age religion. I noticed when Professor Slubeski finished his presentation, he mentioned that archaeology has very little, if anything, to offer to understanding of prehistoric religions. I'm afraid that in the Estonian example, archaeology is more or less the main source, as all of the linguistic and folkloristic sources that have been used in the past as the major sources do not really tell us about the Iron Age religion at all. Of course, the Iron Age, the archaeological material is also very difficult to understand. We do have some of the figures, possibly even the mythological characters. We have some of the fantastic symbols that can be interpreted differently. We do have some of the objects and some of the figures that can be interpreted as amulets or talismans or what else. We do have some remains of ritual activity, and then of course we do have inhumations together with all this rich selection of grave goods, suggesting of the idea of afterlife, where the people needed this. But this is pretty much all. We still are not, we do not see the whole system, and this kind of glimpses and individual examples are what we have to use for the Iron Age religion. Now, the early Christian symbolism entered Estonia already at the end of the 11th century. This is one of the earliest example, the hoard, where we have a silver sheet pendant, possibly made already in Estonia, and there is a nice cross mark here. Those of you who are well educated in numismatics, you probably recognize this cross mark. It comes from the coins, and as we also have from the same hoard another kind of silver pendants which seem to copy Arabian dirhams. This is something that makes us to ask whether this very, very early Christian symbolism, is it really connected with the Christian religion, or maybe it is just copying the exotic coin pendants, something that had a slightly different kind of meaning. However, during the 12th century, a large amount of Christian symbolism and Christian objects entered to Estonia. Many of them come from the Eastern Church, and this is something what is a kind of nice or rather interesting conflict in studying the Christianization of Estonia. Most of the written sources come from the West, most of the material culture comes from the East. So we have a kind of mixture. So here are the objects that come clearly from the Kievan Rus and some of the cross pendants, which are sometimes easier, sometimes difficult to locate. However, if Christian objects are imported from abroad, it is always a matter of interpretation, whether the meaning also came together or if these were reinterpreted. What I find even more interesting and more important is the local interpretations of the cross symbolism. And we find during the 12th century there is a large variety of different kinds where the cross has, where and how the cross has been depicted. Either on the cross pendants, depicted on the sheet pendants, mixed to the penannular brooches or to the arm rings, and so on. So by the end of the 12th century, the cross was the most common decorative symbol, even more than any of these simple triangulars or something like that. So the cross was locally interpreted, which means it probably had also the local meaning. So to conclude briefly, the cross symbolism is that by the beginning of the 13th or even by the end of the 12th century, the cross was the most dominating motif. Usually it is on the luxurious or very well-designed objects. We do not have yet any of the very simple crosses. However, the good chronological frame is still absent, and that's mostly because of the finding contexts, because cross appears mostly either in the hoards or in the settlement and hillfort occupation layers. So it is a bit different from the early 13th century, when we have first inhumations that can be interpreted as Christians. There is a change of practices in the early 13th century. The cross symbolism or any kind of Christianity-related symbolism is absent until then. It is almost like a rule that the Christian symbolism appears only in the wealthier inhumation burials. This one would be the most typical or classical Estonian Christian. A wealthy female with a lot of decorations, including the silver sheets and so on, with a lot of grave goods, including the real grave goods, the skither, the scissors, the ceramic vessel full of food, and so on. And this all makes us to ask, what did this Christian symbolism signify? Is it religion? Is it associated with the rank and the social power? Or is it about the personal relations? Because all of these interpretations are open, especially in the late 12th and early 13th century contexts. Looking about the cross-pendants in the inhumations, there is a very clear sexual division. We have only 2 male burials which has cross-pendant. Most of the cross-pendant, all kind of cross symbolism is associated with females, but also with the children burials. And this data comes from about 200 inhumation data set. But the Christian inhumation is not, or the Christian symbolism is not limited with the Christian or the cross pendants only. I really like this female burial because from one side she has no cross pendant or anything that can be directly associated with the Christianity. But she had a luxurious silver sheet necklace. There are some pentagrams and all the other symbols. And the most central and largest sheet carries the sign of the cross. And moreover, in the lap of her, somewhere over here, there was found a chicken egg. And originally the chicken egg was painted red with a red ochre. So possibly this was related with the Eastern egg, but rather it was the meaning was associated with the resurrection of the soul and body, not with the spring and this time. So the Christian symbolism could have been expressed by a variety of ways, not only with a cross pendant. The Christian inhumations appear then in the early 13th century, which interestingly coincides with the time of the Crusades. However, all of the material culture in these inhumations is clearly local. There are no imported objects. And what is also interesting, and I think it's important, is that the Christian symbolism is proudly on the display. It has not been hidden somewhere under the clothing or something, but it's proudly displayed and exhibited. And also the Christian symbolism appears often in the inhumations that can be otherwise interpreted as pagans, because they do have all of the grave goods, they have all references to say that these people had a clear idea of afterlife and so on, and all of the Christian inhumations that we know until now from the 13th century, they are among the other burials which can be also interpreted as just as pagans. So the 13th century missionary which entered to this Estonian context, first of all, it was clearly a military activity, as is very usual at the time, and which came up also during the discussion in the previous session. But they also had competitive missionaries. The Order of Brotherhood of Swords started to conquer and baptize Estonia from the south. It was soon accompanied with the kings of Denmark and Sweden. And by the 1220s, 30s, Estonia was divided between the crown of the Denmark, Sweden, and the Brotherhood of the Swords, which mean that on the borderlands, all these three powers were also trying to over-baptize. And the local people who had accepted the baptism of one order or one ruler were also considered as enemies and killed. So all of this missionary period was very complicated also for the locals to understand what these three different new powers want. There were also pagan reactions, and the pagan reactions, as far as we know from the Chronicle of Henry of Livonia, the rhetoric of the pagan reaction was clearly against the Christianity. The people promised not to follow the Jesus Christ and the priests and so on. However, it is always the matter of interpretation. Was it really against the new religion, or was it against the new power? The first churches, Adam of Bremen was the first one who happily stated that a church has been built to Kurland already in the 12th century. Whether it really was so, we don't know. Where this church was, nobody knows. We even don't know if this church existed or Adam was just written down some rumors. Until nowadays, we do have only one church which has been confirmed that this is from the eastern side of the Baltic and predates the Crusades. But this is from Finland, the Ravatul Aristimägi, and I think Kendra will speak about this in the next presentation. The Estonian churches, we still do not have a good chronology. We know that many of the churches were built at least in the mid-13th century, but we don't really know if some lighter and wooden construction predated it. But what is interesting and seems to be like a novel discovery is that early parish churches seems to set a new power system, at least in North Estonia. There were the Iron Age power system, together with the large hill forts, settlements, inhumation cemeteries, and so on. But the church was built in 2, 5, 7 kilometer distance in a smaller village. We still don't know why it was chosen like that, but it seems to be at least a pattern in northern Estonia. In the Western Islands, in Saaremaa, it rather seems that the church has been built exactly in the Iron Age power station, power center. Do I still have 2 minutes? Okay. I think that this local symbolism, a key word that has been repeated several times, it is very interesting also in considering the early burials in the churchyards. This church was built at least in the 1250s, 1260s, sometimes like that. And a female burial was found right next to the church, and she had a really very strange cross pendant found on her chest. It really is part of the decoration pin. The decoration pin has been broken, and if we look at this broken part, it has been filed and polished. So it really has been reworked to be used as a cross pendant. So the local people who first accepted the Christianity, they carried on the local traditions, and the local objects were still used also in this new context. So, and the conclusions. The cross symbolism in Estonia arrived at the end of the 11th century, became the dominating motive during the 12th, and since the late 12th and early 13th century, it was the most common motive. The local interpretations are really the most important here, because the objects are made locally. They had some local meanings, but again, we do not really know whether these local concepts were related with the Christian religion, with some kind of magical symbols, or maybe something else. Why not even objects related with the rank, to the power, or so on. As a rule, the Christian symbolism is associated with the nobility and are clearly displayed. And to interpret this kind of conflict between the historical and archaeological sources, we have proposed a concept of pre-Christian Christians. By this, we mean people who, since the late 12th century, have been using the Christian symbols, who have been displaying this, whose identity possibly was somehow related with it. They had somehow incorporated the Christian symbols, possibly some Christian concepts also into their worldview. Maybe in the way how the Salvareans depicted Sami shaman. But somehow the Christian symbols and the Christian symbols concepts had entered to the Estonian religion and culture. At the same time, for the Christians in the Western world, these people clearly were the pagans. There was no Christian administrative system, there was no churches, there were no priests. They had to be reinterpreted, and I'm afraid that by the end of this year, we also have some new data to say something else, maybe something different about the process of Estonian Christianization. So thank you very much.